Hello, faithful, and welcome to the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussions. Only smart takes without the clickbait. And today we're going to be discussing the unfortunate Nick Bosa injury news, other injuries that we're going to get to first, some roster shuffling, and we'll go through the realistic possibility of some of the potential replacements for Nick Bosa, whether it's in-house, on the street, or through the trade market, So let's get right into it. We're going to get to the Bosa news. That's obviously the big news. I'm sure if you've been following on social media, you've heard everybody's opinion under the sun, even hearing from doctors and physical therapists about how much harder it's going to be for Bosa to come back from this. I'm here to sort out all of the nonsense and give you guys and myself a level-headed approach to how San Francisco may tackle this and what they may do in the short term and the long term regarding the injury. But first, before Bosa, there were other, obviously, injuries during the game. Mykel Williams, wrist injury. He came back. He's day-to-day. Renardo Green, neck. He left the game, came back. He's day-to-day. And defensive tackle rookie CJ West broke his thumb, had thumb surgery today on Tuesday. And per Shanahan, he has a chance to play on Sunday, which means he's not playing with a cast on. Brock had a chance. The last two games wasn't going to happen. We'll see if he has a chance against Jacksonville, although I'm sure the chance is better than this past week against Arizona. If CJ West can't go, good news is they have another defensive tackle in reserve, Jordan Jefferson, who they claimed on waivers from the Jaguars before week one started. So he would rotate in with Jordan Elliott, Kalia Davis, and Alfred Collins. Now, the Niners could also choose to elevate one of their two defensive tackles from the practice squad, either Evan Anderson, who has starting experience with the team last year, or everybody's favorite training camp hero, Sebastian Valdez, could also be one of the two designated elevations from the practice squad. One of two potentially if Adrian Martinez is needed again, since both Mac Jones and Brock Purdy are both banged up with a knee and turf toe, respectively. So more moves going on the D-line than just Bosa. Bosa, obviously the biggest one, but let's turn our attention now to the offense quickly. Wide receiver Demarcus Robinson coming off of his 3-game suspension. Kyle Shanahan said, quote, we'll see where he is for this game against the Jaguars. Where he'll be is on the active roster and potentially starting if Juwan Jennings can't go again. So none of this we'll see where he is nonsense. If you don't count Demarcus Robinson, there are currently 6 wide receivers on the 53 active roster. It's Pearsall, Jennings, Kendrick Bourne, Sky Moore, Marquez Valdez-Scantling of the one catch. Congratulations. And rookie Jordan Watkins, who's nursing an ankle injury. They're not going to carry 7 wide receivers on the 53-man roster this week. One of those is going to have to go. So it's either Marquez Valdez-Scantling gets cut or Jordan Watkins goes on IR. And those are the two players that are going to be iffy when you have to make the additional release or sacrifice of a player when Brandon Ayuk comes back in, say, 2 or 3 weeks, 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever it's going to be. But it's either going to be MVS or Watkins. Sky Moore is going to stay. He's the punt returner, although he had that gaffe of obviously calling for a fair catch at the 6. Again, do not fair catch the ball. Do not catch the ball when it looks like it's going to land inside the 10. Just run away from it. Brian Boyer, get your head out of your ass and start coaching your punt returners. So Robinson coming in. Again, it's either MVS or Watkins, who will not be part of the 53-man roster this week. And additional reinforcement, Juwan Jennings. How much different the offense could look, even if Purdy has to sit, just having Robinson back and Juwan Jennings back from last week. You go from your number 2 and 3 receivers being Kendrick Bourne and Marquez Valdez-Scantling to Juwan Jennings and Demarcus Robinson. Major, major upgrade there. Recording this on Tuesday night, so we'll see what the 49ers do in terms of roster moves. But the offense getting stronger, potentially 2 receivers returning this week for Jacksonville. Offensive line also, this happened last week, but just to touch upon, because again, it's more of a roster shuffle. Backup left tackle Spencer Burford went on IR. He's done for the next 3 games, 4 games counting the Arizona game last week. Ben Barch is on IR too. So the Niners started with 10 offensive linemen on the active roster week 1. They are down to 8, which is still okay because that's the bare minimum number of O linemen that you need to have on your active roster for game days. What they can do if needed for this Jacksonville game, they can elevate newly signed tackle to the practice squad, Brandon Parker, who was with the team last year, or Nick Zakiel. But again, he would just be another interior lineman, and they already have Drew Moss and Matt Hennessy as your interior backups and Austin Pleasance as your swing tackle right now. So if anything happens to Austin Pleasance, if anything happens to 2 tackles during the game, say Colton McKivitz and Austin Pleasance, and they don't elevate Brandon Parker, the Niners are screwed. I guess you could kick Dominic Pooney out. He's played some tackle when he was in college at Kansas. I don't know if they, with needs elsewhere, and again, who knows how Purdy or Mac Jones will respond. I'm sure one of them will be okay for Jacksonville. But again, Adrian Martinez may need to be elevated from the practice squad to the 53. So the offensive line, something to keep in mind, especially the way this team is going, right? Someone can get injured in practice, not be available for the game on the O-line. Then you have 7 active and you're going to have to elevate somebody. Fingers crossed there. So we're a little over 6 minutes into the podcast. Let's talk Nick Bosa and the torn ACL. Social media, Glazers like David Lombardi were trying to, backtrack that, Shanahan did not say it wasn't the ACL. He initially did say it was not, based on diagnostic testing that happened on the sidelines. I had a torn ACL, had the reconstructive surgery. I am familiar with how doctors manipulate the leg. They'll tug on your leg. They'll have you bend it in a certain way to see if the ACL was still intact. Based on that sideline examination, Kyle said it doesn't look like it's the ACL, but we need more diagnostic testing. MRI confirmed that was a clean tear, whatever that means. If there's any of course, all injury news is always good news, right? If there's any kind of ACL tear, this is a clean one that you want. Who knows until you get in there what it's going to look like, right? And it's still going to be a 9+ month recovery. Before we get more into the surgery, the rehab, and replacements, let's look on the bright side. If there is one, I'll give you 2 things. In 2020, Nick Bosa tore his ACL week 3 as well, or was very early, week 2 or 3. I know it was back-to-back games between the Jets and the Giants. COVID year. I live in the Northeast. I was going to go to both of those games. Could not because it was COVID. Bosa tore his ACL early, came back in 2021, did not miss a game, 15.5 sacks. Now, I'm not saying he's going to have double-digit sacks next year, but showed how he's going to bounce back. And that was his second torn ACL, once in high school, had the groin injury in college, leading up to the draft, ACL in 2020, ACL again in 2025, different knee than 2020. But you want if you're going to have this injury at all, as a fan, and maybe even as a player, coaching staff, etc., have it early enough in the year where it puts week 1 of 2026 absolutely on the radar, right? So that's silver lining number 1. Doesn't help the Niners this year. Doesn't help the dialogue about who the Niners should trade for and all that good stuff. We're going to get there. But you'd rather have this week 3 than week 13, for sure. Now, the other bright side is the Niners taking out an insurance policy on not only Nick Bosa, but Brandon Ayuk's contracts as well. The Niners will get $7 million of cap savings in 2026 because of Bosa's injury, and they're estimating $3 million based on the games that Ayuk has missed for 2026 as well. $10 million more in cap space next year, which is going to probably financially factor into if the Niners were going to make a move, a trade for a big name player. San Francisco has about $25 million in cap space left in 2025. And last I checked, about $17 million in 2026. 2026 can be finagled with extensions. Like Bryce Huff has 1 year left in 2026, about 15 or $16 million cap hit. They can extend him, drop that cap number down to like 2 or 3 million, and keep him under contract. So we all know there's ways to manipulate the cap, moving money around, etc. Those are your two bright side situations. Now, if you want to look at it that way, right? Trying to not come out of a positive with these injuries, but it's not 100% negative and doom and gloom. What I will also say is don't pay attention to anybody online. I don't care if they're a doctor. I don't care if they're a physical therapist saying how much harder it's going to come back from ACL reconstruction. One thing I saw was, after you have an ACL reconstruction, because usually they take the patellar tendon, there's not as much, area to graft from a second time around. Well, you could take from the hamstring, and Nick Bosa's got humongous legs, or you could take the the ACL tendon or a patellar tendon from a cadaver, a dead person. So there are options. Social media, regardless of what you're following, there's some news, some good discourse, but a lot of bitching and a lot of fear mongering. And people know that, especially when it's going to come to an injury to a star player, that people are going to throw out the worst case scenario stuff. Remember, was it last year or 2 years ago when Joe Burrow had the wrist injury, and the immediate reaction was, well, based on like the literature and science, and actually it wasn't even the literature, just based on discussions with doctors, this could be a career-ending wrist injury for Joe Burrow 2 years ago. Last year should have been the MVP. When it comes to rehab, first off, they're getting better medical care than any of us lay people. The best surgeons, multiple opinions, the best of the best. And when it comes to rehab, athletes are going to be attacking this 24/7 every day. This is not like you or I tearing a rotator cuff, meniscus surgery, back surgery, knee surgery, where our health insurance will only pay for like 3 visits a week, right? Because for me, tearing my ACL, or anybody with a shoulder, back injury, walking, obviously important. Being able to move our arms, obviously important. Being able to write, type, drive, whatever. It is not multi-million-dollar important to a multi-billion-dollar organization in sports league to get players healthy again, or for that player who is maniacal about his body, like someone like Nick Bosa is. That, because I saw something on one of the doctors on social media about how it's going to take longer for muscle to respond. Muscle is one of the first things that comes back. It's the stability in the joint, and if the ACL graft takes through however they are repairing it. Again, a graft from the patient's patellar tendon, the hamstring from the patient, or a patellar tendon or an ACL graft itself from a cadaver. Surgeons have worked on players that have had multiple or more than one ACL reconstruction per knee. It's not normal, but it's not wildly out of the ordinary. And if we're going to say building back muscle is going to be an issue for Nick Bosa, that's not the case. The graft will take the same as the graft originally. And if they want to, what they're essentially drilling holes in, I forget the names of the bones, but for your thigh and your shin to thread the ACL through. And that's how and over time the graft heals and stabilizes the knee. They can fill those holes in with cartilage, re-drill in the same spot, or drill somewhere else, right? Like if you're going to hang a picture on the wall and you put an anchor in the wall or a molly and you kind of bang it through and fill it with, wood filler or spackle, you could still hang a picture there. You could still hang a picture of the same strength there. So guys, I'm not a doctor. I've done enough research of this stuff when I was younger, when I had the tear, even just for articles like this, to understand that the doom and gloom stuff is there just for clicks or engagement. It sucks that he has to come out. Now, could there be a complication? Could the graft not take? Yeah, it's happened to players. Of course it has. But if you're going on like normal case scenario, Bosa should be tracking to play week 1 of 2026. I'm not going to say he's going to come back. Again, the rehabbing 24/7. He's an Adonis. Yes. Is his leg going to atrophy and then need to build back the muscle again? Yes. And it might be more apparent for someone like him than me, who didn't have a lot of maybe like definition in their quads or whatever, when I had this 20, 25 plus years ago. So yeah, his one leg may actually look a little scrawny at before he builds it back up compared to his healthier leg. But I have no worries or doubts about the rehabilitation process that he's going to put in to make him a viable week 1 starting option in 2026, assuming there are no setbacks and setbacks that are independent of the fact that he's just having ACL reconstruction on a knee that he had ACL reconstruction on in 2015. So 10 years apart when he was in high school. So now let's talk about replacements. And the first thing that we need to understand is how Robert Saleh has rebuilt the defensive line, bringing in a big body in Alfred Collins, a stout body in CJ West, Michael Williams, a big stout body that can rush the passer, but is more of a run defender. Keeping Yetur Gross-Matos, same body type as Michael Williams. Getting rid of Leonard Floyd, smaller defensive end, but bringing in a Bryce Huff because he wanted to have a speed third down pass rusher. And he's a little bit smaller, like 6'3", 250. He's not 6'4", 6'5", 265, 270 like Yetur or Michael Williams. And Bosa was 6'4", 265. But if they're going to go to the route of bringing anybody in, it's going to be in the stature, 6'4"-ish, 260-ish build of Nick Bosa and the other DNs that they have, two of the other DNs at least, that they have on the roster. So it's going to rule out, and there's not a lot of people even available like on the street or whatever. But let's just kind of talk about, first, before we get into DN replacements, right? And I'm sure you guys read on social media and did the research. I'm going to go into logical candidates. The real players are going to offset Nick Bosa's injury are coming back starting this week. And it's wide receiver Demarcus Robinson. It might be quarterback Brock Purdy. And if it's not this week, it'll be Thursday night against the Rams. I can't imagine extending beyond that. It's going to be tight end George Kittle, who will probably play after the Ram game at Tampa Bay. Then it'll be wide receiver Brandon Ayuk sometime in October coming back. And there is defensive help on the way in safety Malik Mustafa, who, again, sometime in October, maybe early November, he will be back as well. Those are legitimately more of the players who will offset Nick Bosa's loss versus any other defensive end that you're going to realistically bring in. And I'm going to use that word realistically because you could shoot for the moon, trade for Myles Garrett, trade for Trey Hendrickson, J.J. Watt. The Steelers are not that good of a team. We're going to break it down to logically and realistically in a minute. But who the Niners have on IR, and they're mainly offensive players, those are the people, the players, the teammates that have the best chance to, let's use the word, offset what Nick Bosa means to the defense. Remember, the Niners are a 3-0 team with Nick Bosa, who played 2 and almost a half quarters, but without Kittle for 2 games, without Purdy for 3 games, without Ayuk for 3 games, without Mustafa for 3 games, without Demarcus Robinson for 3 games, and without Jawan Jennings for a game. And I'm not sure if hopefully he's going to play against Jacksonville. Again, let's use the word offset. Those are the players that are going to offset what Nick Bosa, and it might not even could just be Purdy and Kittle, just Kittle and Ayuk, what the offense is going to become, which hasn't been great the first 3 weeks and still getting 3 wins, how that offense is going to evolve and improve. Now, the running game needs to improve some, and hopefully with more of a threat of a passing game, it'll open up running for McCaffrey and Brian Robinson. But those are the players that I'm looking at that are going to have the most impact to keep the Niners headed in the right direction, arrow pointing up, versus trying to figure out who you're going to get to replace Nick Bosa, because there is nobody that's going to replace Nick Bosa. Now, let's talk about in-house options. So it could be practice squad players. Travis Gibson, 6'4", 263. Robert Beal, 6'4", 250, was on the active roster, released, signed to the practice squad when they elevated or promoted Curtis Robinson at linebacker. Travis Gibson passed the eye test and the Pro Football Focus rankings test or grading test in the preseason. Obviously not a Nick Bosa. No one I mention is going to be. Maybe one, but it's going to be unrealistic that they get him. So one of those two players is going to be elevated from the practice squad. You can almost guarantee it. It's just a matter of who. I would like to see Travis Gibson. I think we've seen enough of Robert Beal. He was touted coming out of Georgia to have the quickest get off time. That translated into nothing. So let's see what Travis Gibson can do, right? And same body type as Nick Bosa. Not as maybe cut and Adonis-like and powerful and talented as Nick Bosa. But if he can set the edge and get some pass rush, Salah's going to have to blitz more. And I know this is a team that's blitzing more than Nick Sorensen's vanilla bean, French vanilla, whatever kind of vanilla defense you want to call it last year. But he's going to have to blitz more to generate pressure. You can't just, there's no way you take Nick Bosa away and obviously your front four is just as good. They can absorb it better this year than 2020 because of Bryce Huff and because of Michael Williams and someone like Yator can play inside and outside. And Samo's got some good pass rushing snaps. They're still going to have 5 defensive ends on the 53. And they're going to have 5 defensive tackles. They still have 5 defensive tackles on the 53. So the defensive line is still balanced in that way, obviously imbalanced without the talent that Nick Bosa brings. So either Travis Gibson or Robert Beal will be promoted from the practice squad to the active roster probably tomorrow, Wednesday. Today, on Tuesday, the Niners did sign William Bradley King to the practice squad, defensive end, again, in the same build, 6'4", 260 plus. So he is now on the practice squad. I'm not sure if they have to release anybody, because when you look at the Niners roster on the 49ers official homepage, you still have Adrian Martinez on the 53. You still have Russell Gage on the 53. He's on the practice squad. You have Malik Turner, who was elevated to the 53. He's going to be bumped down to the practice squad again. So it was just hard to figure out the numbers. So I don't know if anyone's going to need to get released. All we do know is the Niners had 2 defensive ends on the practice squad in Gibson and Robert Beal. They added a third in William Bradley King. And like I said, one of Gibson or Beal is going to be elevated or promoted fully sometime this week. When you look at free agents, you're looking at the likes of Carl Lawson, Shaq Barrett, O'Shane Jimenez, Janarius Robinson, formerly of the Falcons. So Carl Lawson, I think, had 5 or 6 sacks for the Cowboys last season. A little bit smaller of a DN, like 6'2", 255. Shaq Barrett around the same. O'Shane Jimenez around the same. Janarius Robinson is the biggest of those DNs. I think he's like 6'4", almost 270. So again, if he can set the edge well, I'm not just saying because he's a big body, he can set the edge. But, they should not be looking at like 6'2", 6'3", 235, 240 pound defensive ends. It's a reason why Leonard Floyd was let go. Here's my disclaimer before we get into actual trade targets. It is too early in the season for the Niners or anybody else to make a trade. Too early. San Francisco at 3-0 may want to see what this roster, as the offense gets healthier, what are they going to look like without Bosa and with whatever defensive end they elevate, bring in, etc. Is that enough to get past Jacksonville to get them to 4-0? And then obviously you have the Rams and the Buccaneers with Baker Mayfield, who may be without Mike Evans again because he pulled his hamstring. Rams, obviously a good team, fell to the Eagles in almost a fluke, having 2 field goals blocked in the fourth quarter and 1 return for a touchdown that covered the point spread. But it feels like we're not out of September yet, that it's too early to make a trade. Knee-jerk reaction is, who are the Niners going to trade for? And it's a good rolling discussion. It's a good ongoing discussion. They're obviously not trading for anybody this week. They're probably not trading for anybody next week. Even if they lose to Jacksonville, they're still 3-1. It cuts both ways. they drop like the next 3 games, maybe the phones get a little hotter. They could and figure out if they could bring someone in. But it's also, how are they losing those games? If they're losing those games, but they're getting 4 sacks on Trevor Lawrence and 3 or 4, listen, 4 is the high watermark, or 3 or 4 is the high watermark for the year. 1 the first week, Bosa the strip sack at the end. 1 this past week, which was Huff at the end of the first half. And I think they had 3 the Saints game, 1 by Upton Stout, 1 by Bryce Huff, and I think it was Bosa or somebody else that had a sack. 5 sacks in 3 games. So if the Niners pass rush is not getting sacks, that's okay, because they weren't getting sacks with Bosa. But you have to look at, are they collapsing the pocket? How is pressure? Are they winning one-on-ones on pass rush sets? And you could tell that eye test watching the game, but then also Pro Football Focus gives out grades the following Monday. Even if the Niners are winning or losing, you have to see how it looks and what the reasons why. If they lose a game because Mac or Brock throws 3 picks, or McCaffrey or Robinson fumbles, or the secondary can't cover it all, they're just giving up big plays or penalties, special teams, there's going to be reasons beyond, oh, we don't have Nick Bosa. Oh, that's why we lost, so we got to make a trade. Look at it from a little bit more holistic approach. Now let's start with the big name, Trey Hendrickson. The Bengals are 2-1. They're probably going to nosedive. Jake Browning is Jake Browning. I have Jamar Chase in one of my fantasy leagues. I think I'm going to put him up to see if anyone wants him for a trade. Because if I can get a solid receiver in return and maybe a pretty decent running back, or I think I might need a tight end, I'll certainly do that. Because I think the Browning effect, as much as the Bengals were trying to blow smoke up everyone's ass about how good Jake Browning could potentially be, and he had a decent stint the last time Burrow got hurt, I'm not so convinced. But they're 2-1. They're leading the AFC North right now, right? The Bengals are 1-2. I'm sorry, the Ravens are 1-2. The Browns are 1-2. The Steelers are 2-1. I don't think the Bengals are going to sustain this. And I don't know if I would want Trey Hendrickson, who's 31, going to be 32, healthier than Nick Bosa has been. But remember, guys, these are all players that are coming to San Francisco. The injury curse is real. This is the equivalent of Harry Potter, the defense against the dark arts teacher. Every year, new teacher. It's cursed. The Niners, injuries, cursed. I don't know how else we could think of it any other way other than you could say bad luck, but maybe there's some sort of a cursed element involved here. Just because Hendrickson's been healthy with the Bengals doesn't mean he's going to be healthy in San Francisco. That's not a reason you don't trade for him. The reason you don't trade for him is he has a $25 million cap hit. He's owed $29 million in cash for the full season, and you would need to give up a relatively high pick or 2 mid-round picks for him. When I'm talking about $29 million in cash that he's owed, he gets paid $1.6 million per week. This isn't going to be a situation where the Bengals are going to eat money to offload him the way the Eagles ate money for Bryce Huff, who was just a bad fit. Like, they were not utilizing him. They weren't playing him. I don't think he was active for the Super Bowl. That means if the Niners were to make a trade at the trade deadline, which is November 4th, the Niners would still owe him $14.5 million this season. That's a lot for potentially a 1-year rental. And I don't think he's a player that they're going to want to extend, either given his age or if they extend Bryce Huff. They have Michael Williams. We're going to assume Nick Bosa bounces back from this and is going to be ready for week 1 in the season. I don't know if the draft capital is worth it. Now, the flip side is, if you can say get him maybe for a 3rd or a 4th, he plays out his 1 year and then walks, then you get that 3rd or 4th back as a compensatory pick in 2027. It offsets the pick, but you're still paying him at least $14.5 million if you trade for him. Yes, again, they got $10 million in cap space for 2026 with the Ayuk and Bosa injuries. But do you want to do that? I'm not sure, and I would lean towards no. I'd be very surprised. It's not happening this week. It's not happening next week. If it happens, it'll happen closer to the trade deadline. But I would be very surprised if they trade for Trey Hendrickson. If San Francisco is, and I don't know what week of the season November 4th is, but let's say San Francisco's 9-2, and they feel like they're a Trey Hendrick, and the offense is clicking and the defense otherwise is playing well, and they feel like they're a Trey Hendrickson away from a Super Bowl run, like acquiring Chase Young in 2023, one more edge presence for a Super Bowl run, acquiring Emmanuel Sanders in 2019, another receiver for a Super Bowl run, then I could see maybe, or it pushing Parag and John to make that trade. A lot can happen between now and then. If they're 5-4 and 6-5, again, I don't know how many games are until beginning of November. It might not be worth it. And I don't think they pull the trigger sooner. Now, other players, other teams, let's quickly rattle them off. The Dolphins, they're 0-3. But again, I don't see a trade happening in the next couple weeks. The Niners are going to want to see how things are going to shake out with who they brought in. Jalen Phillips or Bradley Chubb. All right, Jalen Phillips would fit right in with San Francisco. Came off an Achilles tear in 2023 and an ACL tear in 2024. Apparently healthy. It's his last year of his fifth-year deal. He's owed $13 million. So if the Niners were to trade for him near the deadline, they would probably owe him around $8 million for the rest of the year. Bradley Chubb is signed through 2027. He has a $12 million cap hit this year. I don't know if they can get out of that contract if they don't like what they see, but Miami is terrible. I think they gave everything they had in that Bills game, and it still wasn't enough. And I think now you're just going to see the fall off continue. They have some easy games coming up, like the Jets. Well, the Jets have been game, right? The past couple games. But if it continues to snowball south, they may start fire selling and just to build for the future and the next coach, because it's not going to be Mike McDaniels. Let's look at the Saints. 0-3, feisty the first 2 weeks, got absolutely blown out in Seattle. Last week, 0-3. You can look at Carl Granderson or Chase Young. Now, Granderson, 6'2", 260, close to fitting that size profile. He has a $6.5 million cap hit this year. He's signed through 2027, but you can get out of it after this year with minimal cap hit. Chase Young was signed through a 3-year deal this past offseason. He has a $6.8 million cap hit, signed through 2027. The Niners potentially could take a flyer there and maybe try to flip him, Chase Young, next year when Bosa comes back. Again, looking at, it's not just the short term, what does it mean for 2025? Unless they are, again, like I said, 8-2, 9-2, steamrolling, and they are a above average defensive end away from making a real Super Bowl run. These are just players names that I'm kind of throwing out there as possibilities. Kayvon Thibodeau of the Giants came up. Now he's got a $10 million cap hit. He's got 14.7. His fifth-year option apparently is guaranteed in 2026. So if the Niners make the trade, they are on the hook for almost $15 million next year. They cannot release him. That would not save anything because the Giants picked up his fifth-year option, which is fully guaranteed. Now the Giants have Brian Burns and Abdul Carter. They let Azeez Al-Juari go last year, or did they trade him to Philadelphia? Either way, he's on the Eagles. The Giants are starting Jackson Dart this week against the Chargers. They're not in tank mode. They're just not a very good team. Now, who knows what Jackson Dart does? How much is he going to maybe jumpstart the offense a little bit? They have the Chargers coming to town. Chargers looking really good. Upsets happen all the time. Did anybody see the Browns beating the Packers? Did anybody see the Panthers shutting out the Falcons 30-0? This stuff can happen, but Thibodeau, while I think good in theory, that $15 million in guaranteed money in 2026, I think the Niners shy away from. Then with the Jets, you have someone like Michael Clemens. He's on the last year of his deal. The Jets stink, right? They're not going, they're game, but they're not going anywhere. Michael Clemens, I believe, was drafted when Robert Saleh was the coach, or maybe the year before. But again, the last year of his deal, Saleh is familiar with them. Only a $3.4 million cap hit. He might be the most realistic. I think Clemens and Carl Granderson might be the most realistic trade options for San Francisco. And the last one I'll just throw out there, since he was a former 49er, Arden Key. Titans are 0-3. He just recently signed, I think, either this year or last year, a 3-year deal with the Titans. He has a $9.3 million cap hit. I know he was someone that was moved around to the inside as an inside pass rusher in San Francisco's NASCAR package, but he's another one that's not really big. He's like 6'3", 6'4", 240, 245. That's not fitting the body profile that Saleh wants. So again, I'm throwing options out there, and there might be more that I was kind of overlooking. I know some of these are bigger number options from the financial standpoint. Obviously, the biggest being Trey Hendrickson. Then you have someone like a Bradley Chubb. After that, Chase Young, Kayvon Thibodeau. They're options, right? They're options until they're not. And I'm not sure if John Lynch picked up the phone at all this week to ask about anybody. It doesn't hurt to pick up the phone and ask. They're probably not making a move yet, because why make a move until you see your defense and pass rush and D-line significantly struggle without Nick Bosa? And we're anticipating that to happen, right? Nick Bosa is a top 3 or 4 edge in this league. Anybody else that you're going to bring in outside of, Trey Hendrickson might be a top 5, 6, or 7 edge in this league, but anybody else that you're bringing in, there's obviously a ridiculously significant step down. But I think the smart and prudent thing to do for San Francisco is hold off on a few more weeks before actually pulling the trigger on anything. See where you are mid to end of October. See what your practice squad players are going to give in Gibson or Beal, whoever gets elevated or promoted. If they elevate the other of those players or William Bradley King for one game to see what kind of juice he has. There are options internally. They are not the sexy options that anybody wants to hear. No option is going to be the solve. And if the solve is Trey Hendrickson, it's going to come at a significant cost. It's, are you willing to do it? And if San Francisco's willing to do it, I think it's only under the circumstance of later on in October with a really good record, maybe leading the NFC as the number 1 seed or right there with the Eagles or Lions, Packers, whoever it's going to be. Because the NFC is flawed. The Eagles are 3-0 and they're the best team in the league, if you want to say. The Bills are right there, and obviously the Chargers are playing really well, but the Eagles have not looked good at all other than the third and fourth quarter against the Rams. Then they finally remembered, like, hey, you could throw the ball in football. Detroit looked really good against the Ravens, got smacked by the Packers, and the Packers lost to the Browns, right? The Commanders, how good are they? They lost with Jaden Daniels in Green Bay. And obviously Green Bay is a good team. Dallas is a joke. Chicago's not really that good. Detroit could be hit or miss. And the Rams in their own division, we'll see how that looks on, 2 Thursdays from now, even though it's not going to be a 49er team at full strength. I would love that game to be like, see where you are without Matt Stafford. Maybe Matt Stafford gets knocked around and his back acts up and they have to play with Jimmy G, or they lose Puka Nacua, or they lose Devontae Adams. Let's see where the Rams are when they're less than 100%, because the Niners surely are that. And Seattle's showing some offensive fireworks, but again, they had just as much time to prepare for the Niners as the Niners had for them week 1, and Seattle couldn't do dick. So the last time that they're going to play very well might be for a wild card or some sort of playoff seeding, week 18, the legacy jerseys game, in Santa Clara. So nothing to do now. It sucks that Bosa's gone. This is a team that's 3-0, that's played really sloppy, gritty, drag it out, punch you in the mouth type of games without their full complement or anything even close to it of offensive players. Because as I said last podcast, how the hell would you think Arizona would have lost that game 16-15 if they were missing Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride, and 2 of their other receivers? Because that's what the Niners were faced with offensively, with the injuries and the players that they were missing. September 23rd, as I'm recording this, we're not into October yet. We're nowhere near Halloween, obviously. There is time for Lynch to work the phones and Saleh to work some magic on the defense and see how they could piecemeal that other side, whether it's going to be opposite Williams, Huff, Sam O, Yatur, to see how they can get satisfactory edge and run defense, which feels like it's more the priority than pass rush at the moment, but still give them a little something off the edge. And if the schematic adjustment is blitzing, the schematic adjustment is blitzing. Not the worst thing in the world. It starts with Jacksonville, 2-1 team coming into 3-0 San Francisco. I will preview that on Thursday. But that's going to conclude the podcast for today. Like always, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to make us part of your viewing and listening routine. Whatever you guys are doing between now and we speak again on Thursday, stay happy, healthy, and safe. We will talk soon. Take care.